And when he came to discuss the fact of Sister Faustina's first apparition of Jesus as the Divine Mercy, during which he asked her to have that image painted according to the vision she was looking at, he mentioned that the vision took place on the first Sunday of Lent. Now, the first Sunday of Lent in the Eastern churches is celebrated as the Feast of Holy Images. And that feast was instituted in the 800s at the close, finally, and victory over a terrible heresy in the church called iconoclasm, meaning the destruction of sacred images, which was commanded by the Christian emperor, who was influenced by Muslim teachings that nothing created can be reproduced in art, because that would be idolatry. And so he commanded beautiful mosaics and sacred icons to be destroyed. And many monks who defended the veneration of icons were either sent into exile or killed, and many had to flee if they wanted to stay in the monastic life. One of those came into Italy across the Adriatic Sea, and he was the one who was doubting whether, when he pronounces the words of institution over the bread and wine at Mass, whether they actually turn into the body and blood of Christ. And what happened, that one day as he was celebrating Mass, and more than ever, he doubted whether, when he pronounced the words, the transubstantiation would take place. He noticed that the piece of bread changed into flesh, and the wine in the chalice turned into blood. And he never finished that Mass. They preserved these elements, first in an ivory box, and then much later placed into a special monstrance. And when, at the close to the end of Vatican Council II, when Pope Paul VI gave permission to bishops to have certain relics investigated to see if they were genuine, the bishop in Lanciano, the city in Italy where this monk was and where that miracle happened, gave scientists permission to investigate that host that became flesh and the wine that became blood. At first they were a bit reluctant, but then as forensic experts, those who do research to see if somebody's guilty of crimes, undertook the task. They took the host under microscope and a little bit of it to test, and they discovered that what was there was the cross-section of a human heart. It's just as if you had an apple and cut a slice from the middle of it. That's the piece of flesh that the host changed into. And he found there the nerves and the blood vessels that are usually in a heart. And then the blood had coagulated into little clumps, 5 of them. So when he took a little bit of one of them and dissolved them in special water, distilled water, he found that it was live blood, that it could actually be used in transfusions today. And so he verified that truly a miracle of transubstantiation took place. And so it throws a light also on the request that Jesus made of Faustina when he told her that if at 3 o'clock in the afternoon she could not make the Stations of the Cross, that she should at least step into chapel even for a moment and there adore in the Blessed Sacrament his heart, which is full of mercy. And here this would seem to correspond very much with that miracle. So, by Jesus appearing 80 years ago on February the 22nd to St. Faustina on the first Sunday of Lent, he was, in a sense, underlining the feast in the Eastern Church, which celebrates holy icons, holy images that are to be venerated as the Church was taught all the way from the apostles. Now, as we mentioned, that Jesus said that nobody knows about that feast. That's why he wants the image to be blessed on the first Sunday after Easter and venerated on that day, which means he wanted the feast which Faustina said so and told her already existed to be brought back into use. And so it's interesting that among the Jewish communities, they found various meanings in feasts like Hanukkah, which lasts 8 days. And if you read the Gospels correctly, in the Gospel of John, we can see that Jesus went to the temple on the feast of Hanukkah, which is the feast of the rededication of the temple after it was violated by a Greek ruler, and so it had to be cleansed, the altar had to be rebuilt, and the whole place sanctified. So they say rituals, because Hanukkah is celebrated in different ways by different groups of God's people. It drives home the truth about all religious rituals. This I got from a book on the celebration of Jewish feasts. And they say, these rituals thrive or are alive only when they mean something to people, when they externalize deeply felt concerns. Often, when we are attached to a ritual, we will infuse it with special meaning or manifest some hidden significance in it. I think one example of this is how everybody, even if they don't go to church at all during the year, come to get ashes on Ash Wednesday. That would sort of give you an idea how something means something to them, so it's alive. But otherwise, they forget about it. So in other cases, the book says, a ritual may fall out of use for lack of contemporary impact. Yet the Jews have had the wisdom to keep even underutilized rituals on the books. As circumstances change, we may rediscover their power at some time later on. And this probably very accurately would describe what Jesus meant. That who knows about this feast that Faustina said she was told already existed, but nobody knew about it. And so that would help us understand that perhaps what the octave meant lost its meaning for most Catholics. And that's why by the time of Vatican II, they got rid of them, except the two major ones, which were too prominent to do anything with. Now, in a book written by Father Daniel Lou, a French Jesuit, on the Bible and the liturgy, he sought many sources to show that what happens in the liturgy is deeply rooted in the Word of God, and these things, as we practice them, which includes the Mass, the sacraments, the sacramentals, prayers, have an impact on our life. So the editor who had the book translated into English and published by the University of Notre Dame wrote about the book this way. I think this is important for us to know so that we could say, why all the fuss about a feast? He writes, the rites of the Church and the greater feasts of her liturgical year were intended to be an unfailing means not only for transmitting the grace of the sacraments, but also for instructing the faithful in the meaning of the sacraments and in the meaning of the whole Christian life. During the last centuries, however, the faithful had too seldom taken proper advantage of this primal source of Christian initiation and growth. The reason is that they have lost familiarity both with the scriptural types and figures required for doing so, and with the significance given to these types and figures by Christ himself, by the apostles, and by the fathers of the Church. Too often, in fact, rites and feasts have come to be treated like sacred but mysterious heirlooms, having no living meaning for ordinary Christians today, since they do their work anyway, whether they are fully understood or not. Perhaps we don't fully understand how the 7 sacraments work, but we'll go and receive them because we know we receive the grace. But we miss out on applying their meaning to our life as we go through these sacraments in our life. So it is to remedy, if only in part, this most unfortunate, not to say deplorable situation that Father Daniel Lou has written the present book, taking advantage of the findings of modern scholarship. He, in the book, examines the sign language of the sacraments and of the feasts, more particularly that of baptism, confirmation, and the Holy Eucharist, as well as of the Sabbath. As this language is explained by the fathers of the Church, who in turn based their interpretation on those given in the New Testament and in tradition. And so, he said, the present study is published in the hope that it will prove of great value to all who are interested in learning and instructing others in the meaning of Christianity, as this is expressed in its primary and basic idiom, that idiom being the liturgy.